day one of the 2020 SACCS drew to a close, setting us up beautifully for the main event of the Mpumalanga 400 in Dahlstrom. Join us again after this break. Welcome back to the picturesque little town of Dahlstrom on the high veld of Mpumalanga for the first race of the 2020 South African Cross Country Series. At exactly 8 a.m. on the Saturday, the flag was waved to signal the official start of the Mpumalanga 400 at the Village Green Cricket Oval. As winners of the qualifying race before, Toyota Gazoo Racing's Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings had the honour of pulling away first. But this was only the ceremonial start. The real action got underway just a few kilometres up the road when the stopwatch indicated that we were now racing for real. The first few kilometres of the route was on a small stadium section designed to give spectators a good vantage point and to allow them to get close to the action. And this it did, although it was difficult to see with all the mist still hanging around. After the first few cars slipped and slid their way around the slippery section before disappearing into the forests, the stopwatch started to reveal a story. It's usually a disadvantage to open up the road, but on this day and in these conditions, SA cross-country champions Henk Ladergan and Brett Cummings could care less. The Toyota Gazoo Racing SA driver put the hammer down and started to open up a gap over his famed teammate De Villiers and the Spaniard Alex Harrow, reading the notes for the second Gazoo Hilux. Around halfway into the loop, Ladergan managed to extend his lead to just under 2 minutes. There was more movement behind the two Toyotas. Former champion Chris Visser and Donnie Stassen started the race from third behind the wheel of their Total Exilium Hilux, but the farmer from the northwest opted for the wrong tyre setup during the first loop of the race and struggled with little to no grip. Lance Woolridge and Alvin Vonk didn't need more than the one invitation. The Castrol Racing Ranger quickly pounced on the sliding Toyota and moved up into third place, around a minute ahead of Visser at the early stage of the fight. Behind the leading Class FIA cars, the popular Horn brothers from Malalan, Johan and Werner, quickly made Class T their own by converting their pole position into a fairly comfortable race lead in Class T. The standings midway through Loop 1 revealed that the Malalan Toyota was also ahead of the first of the Class FIA Nissan Navaras, driven by gentleman racer Ernst Roberts, with Henry Kerner reading the notes. Roberts is getting quicker and quicker with every outing, and he had to because he had a hard-charging Castrol Ford Racing Ranger behind him, driven by Brazilians Marcus Baumgart and Kleber Cincia. Making up nearly 10 positions in the first 100 kilometres of the race was the Century Racing CR6, expertly driven by Brian Baragwanath and Jean Moore. This car won a stage of this year's Dakar in Saudi Arabia, but conditions in the tight, twisty and very slippery roads here in Dahlstrom were very different, making Baragwanath's performance even more remarkable. Then came the third of the factory Toyota Gazoo Racing SA Hiluxes. By his own account, Shamir Varioa and experienced co-driver Dennis Murphy admitted that he was taking it a little too cautious early on. A puncher halfway through didn't help their cause either. That was a quick glimpse of most of the action from the majority of the production car field, halfway through the first of the day's racing loops. But what about the guys and girls in the Mad Maxes of cross-country racing, the so-called special vehicle category? Let's start with the warriors in the side-by-side classes, or Class G, as they are now known, where unlucky defending champions Werner and Leon Mostert had to throw in the towel after hitting a rock and breaking suspension components early on. Someone who did manage to reach the DSP in Dahlstrom was high school teenager Kent Rutherford. Kent is the son of SACCS chairman Archie, who has finally passed the baton on to his son and moved to the navigator's seat after decades of competing as a driver. The Rutherfords didn't quite have a clean run and had some space between them and the next car up the road, the similar Can-Am Maverick of Christo Rose and Arno Olivier, who completed the loop in fourth. There was also a bit of daylight between Rose and the men who were currently occupying third, that of Theo Erasmus and Edward Odendahl. Erasmus was sitting safe in third, but had a mountain to climb if he wanted to finish any higher, because the gap to second place, Dean Bradbury and Timmy Burtis, was now more than 11 minutes. Bradbury, on the other hand, had the Class G lead firmly in his sights, Because after the 67-kilometre qualifying race and the 157 race loop, the difference between him and Class G leaders was just a little over 2 minutes. The leaders were Nico Durant and Deirdre Hutting, who were doing a good job of finding the balance between going fast and not making those vital mistakes, despite the very tough and slippery conditions. We caught up with Nico in the DSP after Loop 1.
I think the tight sections fitted quite well, but it's tough conditions though.
If the conditions were tricky and treacherous for the guys in the side-by-sides, imagine what it must have been like to fight big 5 and 6 litre V8 powered machines through the wet, tight and twisty tracks, with all that power only going to the rear wheels. Class pole setters and veterans John Thompson led the first part of the race, but the big Zarco Challenger hit one of the many rocks en route and damaged the suspension, forcing them to the sidelines after steering issues. The Mpumalanga 400 marked the second season for Sandra Jonk as a driver after spending many years reading the notes for her father Kutsia Labuskakni. Now, with husband Yako telling her where to go, the pairing wrestled the big Total Agri Porter around the track to reach the DSP in third position in Class A. Ahead of Sandra, newcomer Tim Howes enjoyed a very successful debut race in the Zarco Magnum that he shared with Gary Campbell. But the man who led the special field by a country mile was Clint Gibson and Alaric Smith reading the notes from the passenger seat of the big striker. Gibson had a commanding lead but knew it was far from over.
Going out again now, it's going to be a bit tricky. It's closing in. It's getting difficult to see in the forests. But George, we've got to bring it home in one piece.
Confirmation of the special vehicle category results after Friday's qualifying and the first of the racing loops on Saturday. Clint Gibson had a commanding lead, whilst Nico Durant was the second special vehicle on the board and the first of the side-by-sides in Class G. That was most of the action from Loop 1 of the Mpumalanga 400 here in Dahlstrom. A number of questions were still waiting answers. How would the production cars reach the end of Loop 1? And who would continue to win the race? Join us after the break.